Joining me now is our friend, Illinois Congressman Mike Quigley, a member of the Appropriations Committee and Select Committee on Intelligence. Welcome, Congressman. It's always good to speak with you. So I understand you were at one of those Mexican Independence Day parades. Give me a sense of what you saw. And is there a palpable sense of fear among people attending that parade?
Yeah, it's good to be back. I was proud to march in the Pilsen Mexican Independence Day parade with my friend Chuy Garcia. And, this is a community on edge. The crowds were down because of that. But there's a real determination, a real resilience there. Given the circumstances, that can be understood.
So on Tuesday, Congressman, Governor J.B. Pritzker said that...
All right. Look, on one hand, you got the city of Chicago telling you that everything is getting better. After years of just total chaos, they're telling you they finally have violent crime under control, and they'll point you to all this data, acting like they're geniuses, showing homicides and shootings are dropping in 2025, hitting lows we have seen in years, and they're celebrating this holistic approach, right? And this new way of policing. But on the other hand, you got the reality. A city staring down a budget deficit of almost $1 billion. A city that, if you actually read their own budget documents, is cutting hundreds of police positions. And a city where they're telling you things are getting better, but also that it's a financial disaster and you, the taxpayer, have to pay for it. And this is a story they feed you. But here's what's really going on. They say these celebrated community programs are stopping crime. But what if these programs are just a giant smokescreen? What if they're designed to cover up a system that is financially broke and being strategically collapsed from the inside? What if this is all a giant scam designed to monetize violence, not to actually stop it? All right. So check this out to get what's happening. You gotta hold two different thoughts in your head at the same time. First, the numbers, and I'll give them this. The numbers look impressive. Through the first half of 2025, homicides in Chicago dropped over 30% and shootings fell by almost 40%. Whoop-de-doo. But we all know that the numbers are juiced up. And the whole idea that I'm looking at it is, when you really look at it, officials are crediting this new strategy, like this man on the screen here, with this community violence and intervention and, Mexican Independence Parade. And the city is pouring tens of millions into it. And if you just look at the paper, it looks like a huge success. But then you get to the second reality, which is the one that's way uglier, besides them trying to glamorize it with these type of programs, is while the city's throwing a party for itself, its bank account is in a negative, right? It's negative of negative. And for 2025, Chicago is nearly a $1 billion hole, and costs are blowing up. Pensions are crushing the budget, and all that free federal money they were living on is gone, and the city is going to broke, bro. So how can both be true? How is the city safer than it's been in years, but at the same time is about to fall off a financial cliff? That's the real question. And when you start to digging, you find out these two stories aren't connected. They're part of some shell game, a game where the prize isn't a safer city, but a story, a narrative that keeps the same people in power, no matter what it costs. The rest of us down the road. Check it. Let's keep going.
Staging for federal enforcement in the Chicago area, it's already begun. President Trump said the decision to send the troops to Chicago was, quote, not a political thing. And today said, quote, Chicago is about to find out why it's called the Department of War, with that, I don't know how to describe that tweet right there. But anyway, what's your response? Because your district covers parts of Chicago as well as surrounding neighborhoods. What are you telling your constituents?
Look, this is the act of a tyrant. This is the act of a bully. It has nothing to do with reducing crime. Wherever the trends are, Chicago acknowledges it can always do better. But for the money they spent deploying the National Guard in Los Angeles, Chicago could have hired 2,000 more police officers, or the other programs that actually reduce crime, the interrupters. Our good friend Arnie Duncan, former Secretary of Education, runs Chicago Cred. His program prevents violence before it takes place. There's many more like it. But the president cut programs like that by $800 million. We are in a less safe situation because of this.
Yeah, I want to point out you're right with that Los Angeles and the cost of the National Guard there was at least a couple $100 million to do that. You and 9 other Illinois members of Congress sent the White House a letter demanding that it suspend its plans. And it says, quote, the deployment of the U.S. military into American cities is not about safety. It's about abusing the power of the executive branch and threatening Democratic-led cities and states that dare to openly oppose your authoritarianism. So explain what you mean there, and how much is Trump attempting to manufacture a crisis to provoke clashes with citizens so he can then take the credit for putting them down?
No, that's why the governor and others have said to the public here in Chicago, don't take the bait. It's important to protest, but do not at any point get violent. It is an extraordinarily scary time. But let me quote the former head of Illinois' National Guard, General Hayes, who said he believes pitting the military against civilians could permanently stain the relationship and the status of the military. It's turning this country against itself. It's a president desperately trying to change the topic from the economy, from inflation, from Epstein, failed foreign policy efforts. And unfortunately, we're feeling the brunt of it here in Chicago.
You mentioned foreign policy, sir. I want to move on to the Russia-Ukraine war because NBC News reports of a plan for the U.S. to be the top watchdog of a buffer zone of sorts inside Ukraine if a peace deal comes together. This demilitarized area would reportedly be secured by non-NATO countries. No U.S. troops would be deployed there. On Friday, Vladimir Putin said any foreign troops deployed to Ukraine would be considered legitimate targets. What do you make of that and of the prospects for peace right now?
Look, Putin understands one thing, and that is strength. He does not see it in Trump. So it's in his interest to just blow past these ultimatums, 7 of them now that President Trump put in place, and continue this. In a war of...
All right, I heard enough. Look. Chicago was already down 2,000 police officers before Trump even said anything. That's not on him. That's on the city leadership. The mayor, the governor, the legislator, the judges, the whole system. It's a Democratic-run system that's been failing these communities for years. And look, man, with the Safety Act, reclassifying crimes, downgrading felonies to misdemeanors, all just ways to make the numbers look better. They want it to appear like things are improving when on the ground is chaos. So when these politicians start calling Trump a tyrant or a bully for wanting him to bring in federal support, it's laughable because the media frames it like he's trying to provoke civilians just so he can look like a hero when it calms down. But the reality is he's doing what these local leaders failed to do, bring order. And let's be real. The reason you see fewer people at parades like the Mexican Independence Day parade that he talked about earlier in this video is because a lot of them aren't here illegally. They're not legal. They're not here legally. So it's not fear of violence. It's fear of immigration enforcement. Look at what happened recently with the Hyundai plan, right? The raid in Georgia. So look at the protests in D.C. Even when crime reportedly down 90%, people are still protesting. Why? Because there's an agenda. 9 times out of 10, I'm not surprised if those protesters in D.C. right now are getting paid by Democratic individuals or Democratic politicians. They keep calling Trump an authoritarian, fascist, a dictator, all that noise, but they never mention the billions spent on housing illegal migrants over the last 4 years in sanctuary cities. No one complained then. Now they want to cry about resources are deployed. Why they didn't use billions to hire police instead of staffing and nursing for non-citizens? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. On that note, family, peace.